We seem to be on Facebook Live. Good morning. Welcome to the online Gurdjieff group. It's Sunday, December the 1st. Boy, December, time is moving very quickly. So far, we've got three of you. Hisham, how are you doing?
Good.
How's the work going?
Well, I've been keeping the closing and doing the daily work that I have already done with the closing and the opening doors and the taking off of clothes and taking off clothes. I observe that I have become more. I do it more often. It is really rare that I forget it. And when I forget it, I just redo the thing backwards. And I have also been doing the Gurdjieff counting when I'm going to when I'm going to work on foot. So the first time it was a little bit hard, especially when I'm counting backwards. But the second, the third time, I got it was easier, and it was even easier when I was visualizing the numbers while going backwards. When I visualize the number, it's really easier. And, so that's it. And yes, I also this weekend I went to the hammam. You know what is a hammam?
That's a hammam is like a sauna.
Yes, and there I have always found it difficult to remember myself to be present, because it's really difficult to stay there for a long while. At a certain moments, the thoughts starts rushing, so I have made it for me an objective to go there, and whenever I notice that the thoughts starts rushing aimlessly, to just stop them and to be in the body. So, and I have done it today, and I wasn't as fatigued and as drained of energy as I have used to be in the past. So this is all.
Okay, I was just trying to call up the finger exercises so that, oh, it's telling me the execution failed. Let me try it again. Something else. Are you being able to do them with both hands?
Well, I can do them with both hands, yes.
I mean, there's a number of different combinations. Whoops. Okay, sorry, I don't have it. I pulled up the wrong one. I might not be able to get it. I didn't prepare that. Basically, whoops, the finger exercises, you tap the first finger once, then the second finger, then the third finger, then the fourth finger you tap twice, and then you go back. And let me try. I know I have it. I'll just. Sorry for those of you watching on Facebook. You get to see all the stuff on my. On my. Where would I have? Here. I think this is no. That's a. Okay, I don't know where I have it. I have too many things. Let me just. Go to. Sorry about this. So you're doing the finger exercises when you're going to work. Isham, are you doing them on the bus or something, or as you're walking?
As I am walking.
Okay. Whoops, here, I've got it now. I had to go do it a different way, but now where am I? Too many different things. So, the finger exercises. So these were taught in movements classes.
That works.
Yeah. And I'll just stop it here. It's almost at the end. These are the numbers if anyone has ever been involved with movements or, whoops, that's too big. 1, 2, 3, 4, 4, 3, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5, 4, 3, 2, and doing it through with the fingers. When you add the fingers, suddenly the counting makes sense. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 4, 3, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5, 4, 3, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and it begins to make sense. And this is one of the ways that we stop chattering in the head brain. It's also adds a regulator to the process by doing two brains at once. According to Mr. Gurdjieff, as he told Catherine Hulme, this kind of exercise slows down the aging process. So each center has a spring, and when that spring is unwound, the center dies. But when we link centers together, we create, what you call a regulator, and this is one of such an apparatus like that. And you can do this on the bus, on the subway, wherever. It's a wonderful exercise to practice. First start with one hand, and then try to do it with both hands. And the thing is, you start with the one with the thumb and index finger, and you start with the other one, the thumb and the baby finger. So you're not doing it exactly contralateral, self-sensing. It makes it a little bit more difficult. And it brings, the two centers in, and it keeps our mind occupied. Ian, how are things there bright and early in Portland, Oregon?
Things are doing okay. It's bright and early. It's cold. We had a little bit of snow. None of it stuck, but it snowed a little bit last night. Weather's chilly here.
Chilly, yeah. It's chilly up here in Toronto as well.
Yeah.
Winter has come early for us. So, and they said we're going to have a heavy winter. So so far it's right. How's the inner work going, Ian?
It's going pretty well. I've had a kind of a shift in how I'm relating to, I guess, negative emotions or emotions in general. I've had a much easier time in the past maybe week and a half, maybe past week, being able to hold the energy without identifying it, the emotion without identifying with it. And I'm realizing now that I just wasn't strong enough before to either to be able to feel it without getting sucked in. And so I'd have a tendency to kind of push it away.
Yeah.
And now, and something, I don't know what it is, but all of a sudden I'm able to feel it, but keep a sense of self kind of separate from it, and just let it do its thing and kind of watch it and feel the sensations with it, and kind of hard to talk about in specific words, but and that's helped quite a bit, and I feel a lot less negative in my life. I feel much just more at ease, and it's easier to relate to people. There's less fear around social situations. Yeah, so it's been kind of a surprise.
No, that's good. I mean, what you're talking about is the disidentification. So you're aware of it. Are you aware of the triggers? Have you been able to trace it back to the triggers? What it is that makes you suddenly get negative, or you just catch yourself in that, catch it rising up and observe it?
More the second. Just that I'm able to catch it without I'm able to catch it and still hold a question about what it is, as opposed to just having the story jump in and be like, oh, I'm angry about whatever it is I think I'm angry about. I'm able to just feel the emotion come up and kind of sit with it. And there's like an open inquiry into like, okay, what's going on? What am I feeling? What's in here? I mean, I'm not thinking any of those words. It's that I'm just trying to describe the state.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's a distance. It's disidentification, definitely.
Karen, how are you? Your microphone's off. Can we unmute you, or you might have to do it on your end? How are things in Mexico? How's your inner work going?
It's going rather well, Allan. I've been working with a mala and words to go with it, so that's been interesting. My group hasn't met for a week, so I've been lonely. But everything's fine here.
What do you mean by working within a mala?
Well, I have a mala, and
Is that a set of beads?
Yeah.
So that's the Tibetan,
This is a practice that my teacher told me to do, to take the mala and count the beads and say I with each bead. And I'm enjoying doing it because it makes me very much focused.
Yeah.
So it's been a good exercise that he gave me.
Yeah, I mean, Mr. Gurdjieff in the Women of the Rope, to them, he gave them similar exercises with beads and told them to work through the beads. We don't know the actual exercises he gave them, but we know that he told them to get beads and to work with the beads. So in one sense, it's involving your moving center. With you have to move, you have to get the thumb, and the other part, it's keeping the chattering mind, that looping formatory apparatus, focused on something much more relevant rather than just the normal chatter. Do you find, how long do you do it for, Karen?
Well, each round is taking about 4 minutes, so I've done 3. It's the maximum.
So you do it, it's 12 minutes, you do it approximately.
Yeah. But I don't always do 3. Sometimes I do 2, sometimes I do 1.
Yeah.
I'm working up to doing 4 or 5, just spending more time with it.
Have you found that you're harvesting a higher energy doing that? Does it affect your state afterwards and, perhaps even for the rest of the day?
That I can't say, but during the time that I'm doing it, it's very, I feel good vibes coming down, a descending octave on me.
What about immediately after you finish?
I wish I could say I noticed something, but I don't.
Okay.
I'm going to try to pay more attention to that.
Yeah, try to pay more attention to that, because you're getting your machine to work correctly, and there should be a bit of a payoff that you can notice. How long have you been working with the beads?
Just a couple of weeks.
Okay.
So I'm just working up to more and more rotations, or whatever you want to call it. Yeah. Times around the beads. They're 108.
I mean, you know what? I've got exercises on the Gurdjieff Group of Toronto YouTube channel where we do something similar, and I've talked about this before, showing them with using our fingers and using the bones in our body to move through prayers and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So, it's somewhat similar in the focusing. And for you, you're focusing on the moving center with the movement of your fingers, and you're focusing on the intellectual center with the words in your brain, and you're bringing them together through the use of the beads. So that's for those of you who are watching on Facebook or who will watch later on YouTube, this is a good exercise to do, to work with beads. I guess with the 108 beads, are they Tibetan beads or did you?
Yes, they are. No, a friend gave me these. They're really beautiful, jade and pearl,
Okay.
that she had blessed by monks in Tibet.
Okay.
So they have some pretty cool energy in them.
Yeah. Okay. I'm just going to mute you. I think that could be your dog. Okay. Keith, how are you doing? They're in Northern England.
Fine, Alan.
Inner work. This is your second meeting. What kind of inner work are you doing? Are you trying to self-remember? Are you giving yourself specific exercises every day?
It's practicing self-awareness, been sensing the whole of my brain, whole of my body, doing that every day as much as I can.
How is that going? How often are you able to bring your awareness back into the sensation of self, into your body?
It's going well. I find myself sort of like observing me thoughts and feelings, and standing back from them, becoming more aware of them.
Okay. I love the Northern accent, the way he says, observing me thoughts and instead of my thoughts. I lived in New York for 7 years, and it's to me, a wonderful aspect of the Northern speech. Instead of saying my thoughts, me thoughts. I'm just pointing that out. If people think that's ungrammatical, it's nonsense. It's completely grammatical. It's part of the Northern English dialect. And anyone who's spent time in the North will have heard it many, many times. Today I'm going to, Hisham.
Yes, I just want to add something. Ian talked about negative emotions, and I just remembered something that I had saw in myself while I had my mother over this last week. And at first, when in the first day when she was here in my house, I noticed that there is something in me that that was trying to, as though to play a role, to project a role, which is suiting so that it's like a survival mechanism that I have observed in myself this last year, and when my mother was there, it just surged. It just happened, and I was able to see it, and to just and whenever I and to just recall these understandings about it, how it arose, how I have developed this inner habit, this emotional habit, and to just disidentify with it, and to just laugh about it. Yeah. When I done that, I have that I was able to relate to my mother on a deeper level. So that's it.
Yeah, families are a good place to do a lot of inner work because they don't want you to do the inner work. They expect you, they slot a certain picture over you and they expect you to be who you've always been. And it's a good place to practice disidentification, to actually focus on playing the role, not a role, but the role of yourself, so that they don't notice any difference. This is outlined in Mr. Gurdjieff's wartime Paris meetings. So those organizations that tell you to break away from your parents and family, they're really cultic organizations. Mr. Gurdjieff told his students to go back into his family and learn to disidentify. That is, play the role of themselves, not get caught up in themselves, but to act as if they were themselves. playing that role with that bit of inner disidentification from a perspective of non-identification, but to do it in such a way that your family won't really notice. The whole monastic tradition of fleeing the world, fleeing your family. In the fourth way, we don't flee the world and we don't flee our family. We work in the conjunction with our life, where our life is. I'm going to just play a recorded inner exercise, which I call the morning sitting. I want to play it. It's 22 minutes long. This will give me an opportunity to participate in it. And I just want those of you who may be watching on Facebook for the first time, whatever, to understand that I do have a whole series of inner exercises that are on the Gurdjieff Group of Toronto YouTube channel. And I think this is one of the most important ones. I talked about this in the last meeting. I quoted Mr. Gurdjieff saying that, let's say we breathe in 15 elements and a normal person breathes out 10, but another person only breathes out 5. It's because the person who has breathed out 5 has been able to extract higher particles, higher elements from the air. And these higher elements are the carbons that we need. They're the higher substances we need for the alchemical process to continue within ourselves, particularly in the octave of air. So this exercise, it's my rendition of an exercise that came via a friend, and the original exercise that it's based on was a recording by George Adi, who was one of Mr. Gurdjieff's pupils, and he went to Australia and set up groups there. But rather than using George Adi's exercise, I rewrote it and re-recorded it so that there are no copyright problems and no one can come after me. So I'm just going to play this and just follow along. There are going to be words on the screen. It's going to be my recorded voice. And I call it the morning sitting, and I gave it that name specifically so that you can think about doing this in the morning, to encourage this to be the morning practice, because we extract the higher particles from the air by doing this particular exercise.
The morning sitting, an inner exercise from the Gurdjieff tradition, reformulated by Allan. It is best to begin in a comfortable position with your feet slightly apart and your palms on your thighs or at your side. Then scan your body to ensure that the energy is able to flow freely down your arms and legs. And if you are not already relaxed, please do whatever you need to do in order to relax your mind, body, and feelings, all 3 centers, before you continue with this exercise. And then begin by affirming the 3 lines of work. So repeat either silently or out loud. I am doing this work for myself. I am doing this work for humanity. I am doing this work for the earth herself. Now we lose higher substances that we produce in various ways, and one of the aims of inner work is to create and keep higher, more refined substances within ourselves to grow our being. So following Mr. Gurdjieff's instructions, affirm the following by repeating silently or out loud. May the higher substances I produce during this exercise stay within me. Now do not alter the natural rhythm of your breathing, but simply allow your body to breathe naturally throughout this exercise, and start by becoming aware of the sensation of gravity, the sensation of balance, and the sensation of the temperature of the air surrounding your body. And then use the sacred ability of your mind to direct your attention and direct it to your right shoulder, your right bicep, your right elbow and the bend behind your elbow, your right lower arm, your right wrist, the palm of your right hand, your right thumb, index finger, middle finger, fourth finger, and baby finger, the top of your right hand, and moving back up your right wrist, forearm, elbow, upper arm to your right shoulder, and then allow your entire right arm to fill with sensation, sensing your entire right arm. And while using the sacred ability of your mind to direct your attention, keep part of your attention directed onto the sensation of your whole right arm, and direct another part to the sensation of your right hip, your right upper leg, your right knee and the bend behind your knee, your right lower leg, your right ankle, your right heel, the bottom of your right foot, including your instep, your right big toe, second toe, middle toe, fourth toe, and baby toe, the top of your right foot, and moving back up your right ankle, lower leg, knee, upper leg to your right hip. And then allow your entire right leg to fill with sensation, sensing your entire right leg as one, while also remaining aware of your right arm. And while keeping a part of your attention directed onto the sensation of your right arm and leg, direct another part to the sensation of your left hip, your left upper leg, your left knee and the bend behind your knee, your left lower leg, your left ankle, your left heel, the bottom of your left foot, including your instep, your left baby toe, fourth toe, middle toe, second toe, and big toe, the top of your left foot, and moving back up your left ankle, lower leg, knee, upper leg to your left hip. And then allow your entire left leg to fill with sensation, sensing your entire left leg, while also remaining aware of your right arm and leg, and while keeping a part of your attention on your right arm, right leg, and left leg, direct another part to the sensation of your left shoulder, your left bicep, your left elbow and the bend behind your elbow, your left lower arm, your left wrist, the palm of your left hand, your left baby finger, fourth finger, middle finger, index finger, and thumb, the top of your left hand, and moving back up your left wrist, forearm, elbow, upper arm to your left shoulder. And then allow your entire left arm to fill with sensation, sensing your entire left arm, while also remaining aware of your right arm, right leg, and left leg, sensing all four of your limbs at once. And do your best to continue to maintain this awareness of all four of your limbs for the remainder of this exercise. Now we have 5 sacral vertebrae in our tailbone, 5 lumbar vertebrae in our lower back, 12 thoracic vertebrae in our middle and upper back, and 7 cervical vertebrae in our neck. So as you remain aware of all 4 of your limbs, use your head brain to bring a part of your attention to the sensation of the first vertebrae, sacral 5, at the very bottom of your spine, and then move up to sacral 4, 3, 2, 1, and moving up to the vertebrae in the lower back, sensing lumbar 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and moving up to the middle of the back, sensing thoracic 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7, and moving up into the upper back, sensing thoracic 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and moving up into the neck, sensing cervical 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And then sense your entire spine at once, while also sensing all 4 limbs. And while holding on to the awareness of your 4 limbs and spine, also become aware of the occipital bone in the back of your skull, the temporal and parietal bones at the sides and top of your skull, the frontal bone in your forehead, aware of all 4 limbs, your spine, and the bones in your skull. Then become aware of the sensation of your eye sockets, and notice how your eyes are like 2 soft orbs resting in these sockets. And then move part of your awareness down to your nasal passage, the roof of your mouth, the inside of your mouth, and sensing the place where your teeth and lips meet, sensing your tongue resting in the bottom of your mouth, and moving part of your awareness down, and sensing your jaw and the flesh below your tongue, and moving part of your awareness into your throat, and down your throat, into your entire chest, solar plexus, lower abdomen, pelvis, and right down to your reproductive organs, aware of all 4 limbs, spine, skull, eye sockets and eyeballs, nasal passage, roof of mouth, inside of mouth, tongue, jaw, throat, chest, solar plexus, abdomen, pelvis, and reproductive organs, developing the sensation of self and sensing your entire body. And then allow your attention to rest. Now we are going to begin the key work of consciously digesting the higher active elements in the air we breathe. So bring your attention to your breath and become aware of the sensation of air flowing in and out as you breathe. And do not alter your breathing, but allow your body to follow its natural rhythm. Now repeat Mr. Gurdjieff's instructions, either silently or out loud. With full attention, I will draw in my breath, saying I, and sensing the whole of myself. I wish very much to do this in order that I may digest the higher substances in the air for myself. Then as you breathe in, remain aware of the sensation of your whole body, while also becoming aware that something in the air, some quality, some feeling that is different than sensation, arises as your breath flows down into your solar plexus. And as you breathe out, sensing your whole body, imagine exhaling a gray, foggy waste, while some part of this new quality, this new feeling, flows from your solar plexus down to your reproductive organs. Use your head brain to imagine breathing in higher active elements in the air, while using your body brain to remain aware of the sensation of your whole body, while also harnessing your feeling brain to become aware of a different quality, a feeling that arises as your breath flows down into your solar plexus. And as you breathe out, imagine exhaling a gray, foggy waste, while feeling how some part of this new quality, this new feeling flows from your solar plexus down to your reproductive organs. Now silently breathe in the word I, and breathe out the word am. silently breathing in the word I, and imagining with your head brain that you are drawing active elements contained in the air into yourself, while also using your body brain to sense your whole body, and using your feeling brain to feel this feeling that arises as your breath flows down into your solar plexus. And then as you silently breathe out the word am, imagining in your head brain that you are exhaling a gray, foggy waste, while sensing your whole body as one, and feeling that something of this feeling that arises remains in your solar plexus, while another part of this feeling flows down to your reproductive organs. Silently breathing in the word I, and imagining with your head brain that you are drawing active elements contained in the air into yourself, while also using your body brain to sense your whole body, and using your feeling brain to feel this feeling that arises as your breath flows down into your solar plexus. And then as you silently breathe out the word am, imagining in your head brain that you are exhaling a gray, foggy waste, while sensing your whole body as one, and feeling that something of this feeling that arises remains in your solar plexus, while another part of this feeling flows down to your reproductive organs. And continue doing this, silently breathing in the word I into your solar plexus, and breathing out the word am for the next 5 minutes. And as you do so, we will ring a soft bell every minute to gently remind you to do this. and then allow your attention to rest. Now finish by becoming aware that you are surrounded by an atmosphere on all sides that is roughly a meter or so, and recognize that your thoughts and associations, your sensations and feelings can all produce waves that can disperse your atmosphere and cause the emanations you produced during inner work to be lost. So become aware of your atmosphere, a meter more or less. Become aware of this boundary surrounding you and focus all of your attention on keeping it from escaping beyond this limit. Collect it. Keep your atmosphere contained within this boundary. Keep it quiet, still, without movement or waves, as you keep your thoughts and sensations and feelings quiet and tranquil. And in a moment, on the count of 3, suck this atmosphere into yourself, consciously drawing it in with all of your will in order to conserve yourself in this atmosphere. 1, 2, 3, suck it in. And retain something from this exercise within you as you breathe out. Then finish by repeating, either silently or out loud, "May results from this exercise be transubstantiated in me for my being." Now please do not rush off anywhere or get lost in thought or any form of identification that will pull your awareness away from this present moment and cause your emanations to be dispersed. But rather, try to maintain this collected state. Try to sense your body as one organic whole and keep your atmosphere calm and collected for at least 10 minutes so these emanations can settle within you and help you to grow your being.
Okay. Any comments? Right now in this state, for those of you watching on Facebook or who may be watching online later on YouTube, just breathe in and breathe out and become aware of your hands. Try to sense an atmospheric quality, a shimmering quality, a vibrance in your hands as you breathe. Notice that this atmospheric, shimmering, vibrant, effervescent quality, it almost, for me, it seems like it flows down around the outside of my hands. And for me, it's very distinct from the sensation of my hands. This shimmering, vibrational, atmospheric, effervescent, and these are just metaphors, qualities. This is feeling as opposed to sensation. We can become aware of it much easier or more easily in our extremities. So I can not only feel it very powerfully in my hands and fingers right now, but I can also feel it in my feet. And if you can't feel it, if it's difficult, it's because you haven't done enough inner work. Through inner work and inner exercises, we pull into ourselves, we absorb the higher carbons that we need for inner work. We need to already have substances within us that allow us to do inner work. And so through self-remembering, through the sensation of our body, through doing exercises such as this, which is related to feeling and developing feeling. And this is also related to breathing in those higher substances necessary for us to do the inner work. Just keep at it. Keep at it, keep at it, keep at it. And eventually you will bring enough of these particles in your being into you, these higher carbons, that you can begin to do more substantial inner work. Are there any comments? Let me unmute. Any comments about this exercise? Anything you would like to share? No? Okay. I want to, something of a number of people have asked me recently. And so I want to clear this up. Just give me 1 second. So there have been a number of posts that I've been putting on my Facebook wall where Mr. Gurdjieff talks about how there will not be a mass awakening of humanity. And there are a number of reasons for this. One reason is you cannot mechanically or unconsciously awaken. Every act of awakening requires a deliberate act of conscious intent. I cannot make you become aware of the baby finger of your left hand. I can become aware of my own baby finger of my left hand. It requires an act of intent on my part. So we cannot collectively evolve. The next step up into the state of personal consciousness, into the state of mindful awareness, has to be an individual act. It's something that we ourselves have to do. It's not part of nature's plan. Nature gave us the first mechanical shock, breathing, that allowed people to develop to a certain level. And that's where it ends. The next work that begins must be self-evolution, self-guided. It requires acts of intent, acts of awareness. And like I said, I cannot make you aware of the baby finger on your left hand. I can describe it, I can talk about it, I can use words, and that can make you aware of it. But that's only when I'm talking to you. We should be trying to be aware of the sensation of self, our whole body, wherever we are. Mr. Gurdjieff said, remember yourself always and everywhere. So as we sit down, as we stand up, as we're sitting, as we're walking, to do this. But if we don't have the substances necessary within us, we won't be able to do it. So this is the first part, the first key to understanding this. The next key, I'm going to show a diagram. I have a degree in psychology and a degree in religious studies. I do not have any training in graphic design or whatever. So all of my illustrations, they're not professionally done, but I did this on Adobe Illustrator last night. There are certain distortions in it. I will explain them and elaborate on it. But every time there's a transformation of energies, fine material is separated from coarse material. A metaphor that I use is imagine, a man walking along a path and he sees a beach of golden sand. And he is able to separate the gold from the sand. So rather than having a pile of golden sand, he will have a pile of sand and a pile of gold. He will have separated the fine from the coarse. And this is the alchemical process. We do this through food. Food comes in, let me go to right over here on the very left. Food comes in at dose 768. It comes into the mouth. The higher carbon, the plus sign there is the saliva in our mouth, plus the chewing. The higher is extracted, which is Ray 384, but a lower is also extracted. So say we eat an apple. In the first stage, the higher is separated from the lower goes down, and eventually we excrete it. And then it moves up to Ray 64, which is in the stomach. Then it moves into the duodenum where Me 192 is, and then it requires the shock of air, and then it moves up to Fa 96, which is in the liver. And coincidentally or not coincidentally, the liver is the source of anger, and these are the angry, homicidal emotions at World 96, where we feed the moon. Then it moves up to SO 48 in the cerebral hemispheres, then to La 24 in the cerebellum. And here, La 24 is produced in the cerebellum, and all of these, the actual places where these energies are transformed is found in Beelzebub Tales to his grandson. But science is now, the neuroscience is now saying that the ability to sense the position of our body in space is an attribute of the cerebellum. And Law 24 is what fuels the mindful awareness. And then C12, the highest that we naturally produce, is refined in the testes and the ovaries. Now, you look at that diagram and it's not quite so obvious. Oops, let me come back. The fine separated from the coarse. And here I just have to say, I'll explain this in a minute. The proportions for this are out. You know, when I have this square, I'm not sure where my, there. When I have this square here, this square is exactly half the size of the first square, and this is exactly half the size. This is for illustration purposes. I do not believe that this is actually what happens. But, you know, we eat an apple. It comes into our mouth at dose 768. We chew on it, and the saliva in our mouth and the chewing acts as carbon 192, and the fine is separated from the coarse, and the coarse eventually moves down through us and we excrete it. And then it moves up to the next step, where that's in our stomach, and it meets with the gastric juices, which act as the higher carbon. And the fine again is separated from the coarse at that level. And again, the fine and the coarse are half of the square here, but again, this is just for illustration purposes. So as we move up this transformational process, and here I've put the labels in that is found in the diagram of all living things. So organic life starts at the level of metals, then it moves up to minerals, metals and minerals, then plants, then invertebrates, and then here vertebrates and sleeping man, and then personally conscious man, and then awake man. And here I should also add this level of vertebrates up here. This square, it's not proportional. Mr. Gurdjieff said in Tales that when we as a species, when we humans make another species go extinct, part of humanity is drafted in to fill that gap in energies that would otherwise be absent. These are like steps up, and each step up is predicated on the step below. So for instance, you know, we made all of the bison in the Great Plains go extinct. It was a way to exterminate the Indians, just indiscriminately killing their food source. And one of the unfortunate results of this is that more humans are required to have a herd-like mentality. They are required to transform that lower level of energy. So there's this continuum, this gradual step upwards as we move through this process. Now, done this way, this is what it looks like if we move up. So the level of normal human beings would be at this level. But again, I think this proportion is wrong. This is for illustration purposes. I actually, intuitively, I don't have any proof of this, that this is a much better representation of that movement upwards. Whoops, sorry. This is a much better representation, or even potentially this is a much better representation. So you need a stronger, wider, larger base to support the next step up, to support the next step up, to support the next step up, to support the next step up. And just metaphorically assuming that these are the last levels. So this is sleeping man and, you know, the vertebrates. This is personally conscious man, and this is awake man. We can see that if all of humanity suddenly awoke and moved up to this level, there would be this tremendous gap, and the whole structure would collapse and disintegrate on itself. That there is a proportioned movement upwards. That the diagram of all living things seems to make it appear as if it's equal steps up, but it isn't. And so for this reason, there will never be a mass awakening of humanity. That humanity will never all suddenly shift up to the next level, or even large numbers of humanity shift up to the next level. Mr. Gurdjieff said, quantity is not important at the higher levels. It's quality rather than quantity. He also said that, you know, to begin to bring humanity back into alignment with this planet. And keep in mind, he was writing between 1924 and 1949, mostly in the late 20s when he was working on Beelzebub Tales to his grandson, though he refined it. He said that what we really need to do is get a sufficient quantity of humanity self-remembering. And he said it's not a huge amount. For those of you who are very familiar with In Search of the Miraculous, he said 200 conscious individuals. That's at the top step of humanity. If they so chose to do, could alter humanity. You know, when he was speaking, 200 people, there were 2 billion people in the world. Now there are 8 billion people. Could this be 800 conscious individuals? That's the level beyond self-remembering. It's the level of personal consciousness. So it's like a pyramid that narrows, but you can't remove a section of the pyramid and expect the pyramid to survive. J.G. Bennett really went into the fact that soil is a living quality, and a lot of the farming practices that we are doing to soil by adding nitrates and fertilizers are actually killing a lot of the bacteria in the soil. And if we destroy that one level, all of life above it will collapse. So there will never be a mass awakening of humanity. These teachings are not designed to be taught to the masses. The masses can learn about them, but most people will have no interest in them whatsoever. It's just a small segment of humanity will be interested. And the problem is that we've gotten out of balance at the higher levels. When we think of 200 years ago, Tibet was an incredible source of work on oneself and higher energies. So were the Sufi monasteries in Central Asia, the monasteries in Ethiopia, different places that have all been overrun now by warlords and people with AK-47s, or in Tibet's case, the communist Chinese. So it's like humanity has, you know, had the top part sort of taken off. It's being decapitated. And as a result, the problems that we're experiencing in the world today are happening. And the way we solve it is we begin and try to grow our being at the higher level. Are there any questions on this? I just, I've had a number of people send me private messages or make comments through Facebook in the last few week or so, and so I thought I would try to explain it here. Any questions, any comments? No, okay. Another thing I want to point out, just let me come back to here. The food diagrams that I use. This diagram is the diagram found in Search of the Miraculous. The way Mr. Gurdjieff may have diagrammed it out to Uspensky, or Uspensky diagrammed it out, on a piece of paper when Mr. Gurdjieff was talking about it. This diagram, it's quite confusing. You can follow it. You can look down at the left. Just let me get my. You can look down at the left. Food comes in at dough 768. Whoops. Goes to Ray 380, me 192, and then here requires dough 96 of air, and then the octave of air develops, and the octave of food continues, and all of this. Back in 2003, I pasted this diagram here beside my bed. And it was the last thing I saw when I went to sleep. The first thing I saw when I woke up. I kept this beside my bed for close to 2 years. And then I began to re-represent this. So this is just a re-representing with a bit more detail, because he talked about the carbon meeting the nitrogen and becoming the oxygen, the affirming meeting the denying, becoming the reconciling. So I've merely added the triple process. This is not quite properly represented because it's more like a triangle. But using a spreadsheet, it was a way of representing that the higher blends with the lower to meet in the middle. This diagram here is the middle one. It is the personal consciousness. Taking away and just man as he's born is the one on the left. And then man as he can become is understanding the nature of the development of the law of octaves, and also the descriptions found in chapter 9, where Mr. Gurdjieff talks about, how Do 48 can eventually reach La 6. So this is just a re-representation of that original diagram, following the theory as outlined in Search of the Miraculous. So I didn't invent anything here. I just tried to make it more complete. And then, as you can see, I've added over on the left. These are the labels. Whoops. These are the labels that were given in for organic life. The diagram of all living things: metals, minerals, plants, invertebrates, vertebrates, man, angels, archangels, the unchanging, and the absolute. This here, I've changed it slightly to make it clearer: wholly affirming, wholly reconciling, wholly denying, which we can see with these numbers here. And then awakened man, awakened man is on the level of the angels. Awakened man is on the level of the sun over the right here. This is the ray of creation. Mindful man, better to put personally conscious, which I have down here, personal conscious. Mindful man is the proper level of humanity, but we don't exist at that state. This is man, in the natural state, not caught up in the head brain, and it's on the state of the planetary realm. And then sleeping man is on the level of the earth and on the level of
with your boyfriend, huh?
Oops. Talking to her dog. I'm just switching that off. So sleeping man is also on the level of the earth, and there's a part of us if we look down here, 3-story beings, a part of us that's on the level of the invertebrates and the level of the moon. So I've really, through these diagrams, and I even tweaked these diagrams a few weeks ago. So I've been working on these diagrams for years, since I take them beside my bed, to just better and more completely represent what is going on. So the square down on the bottom left, this is mechanical man. The middle square is mindful man or personally conscious man. The square on the right is conscious man. So this is using man as a 3-story energy factory, how we move up. Representing it this way also gives us some insight, because this level for a normal man feeds the moon. Mr. Gurdjieff talks about how we can escape the clutches of the moon and stop feeding it. So when we move our being up to the next level, our lower level is the mechanical level. We're not feeding the moon. And then if we move ourselves up to the next level to become awakened man, the lower level is the level of personal consciousness. It's world 24. J.G. Bennett said this is a very reactive emotional state. So even a conscious man, even an awake man, can have access to somewhat volatile emotions. So this is sort of putting a lie to the whole Eastern belief that the guru is perfect. There are a lot of people who go out of their way, who surround a guru, who keep some of these darker aspects from escaping to the wider population. They don't want people to realize that the guru can have these very reactive emotions. And I also believe that this is why Mr. Gurdjieff refused to allow anyone to whitewash him, why he exhibited these traits, because he wanted to demonstrate something that you do not find within the monastic tradition, you do not find in the guru tradition, that someone who is at the level of an awakened being, they're on the level with the angels over here, they're on the level with the sun, so they are solar beings. At their highest, they have access to the lowest level of the Godhead, to the holy denying. So at their highest, they're connected to the lowest part of the divine, but they are not connected to the absolute, the holy affirming. That is beyond our possibility. So understanding the nature of these diagrams, understanding the nature of this work, we can begin to understand some of these things. So I just wanted to explain that. I've had people who have come and wondered where I got these diagrams. I created them I made a slight modification a few weeks ago. I created them over a fairly significant period of time. And actually, there's something wrong in this diagram, which I caught and I've changed. So this diagram, I realized that I had misrepresented by putting this me in. This me shouldn't have been there. So, whoops. Taking this out, I've redone it without that me there. And this shows us something of the effect of the, let me get my tools again. So without this dough having the sufficient energy, the me from a reconciling me, which is the gray, is not able to become a denying me. Air is able to pull this me over. So somehow turning something from a reconciling element into a denying element is part of the transformational process. I known about this for a long time. I just hadn't included it in my diagram, and I went back and fixed that. So for Soul 48, this is the higher emotional center. To develop the resonancy, it has to shock the gray, the reconciling element of me 12, to create the denying element, which then provides the shock over here, which allows this to develop and man to begin to work on his being. Now, to run, the runner. To run is a verb. A verb represents the reconciling element, the nominalization of a verb. So come back here. To run is the verb. Over here, the runner is the nominalization of the verb. It's turning the verb into a noun. Nominalization means noun making. So within our language, we can actually have an example of how a reconciling element is transformed into a denying element. To run, the runner. To smile, the smiling person, or whatever. And we can begin to understand just a slight bit more about the nature of the transformation that's required. So, whoops. Now going back to last week, here are the specific ways the human machine gets dirty. And we should begin with self-observation, trying to look at all of these. These are all the actual words that Mr. Gurdjieff used, and I just put the numbers, and they're found in 2 sections in chapter 9. Unnecessary and unpleasant emotions. So unpleasant emotions are negative emotions. But here he also includes unnecessary emotions. So you've got to look within yourself through the process of self-observation. What are your unnecessary and unpleasant emotions? The next one is the expectation of unpleasant things, thinking you're going to lose your job or the economy is going to collapse, both possible and impossible. A lot of what we fear is just purely our imagination. It's never going to happen. I've spent a lot of my life fearing economic collapse and losing money and bankruptcy, but I've never, ever not had a roof over my head and food in the fridge, ever. The amount of time I've wasted, the amount of energy I've wasted in my life fearing something that has never happened. Bad moods. And people get stuck in moods. And they wake up in an angry mood, and we say they woke up on the wrong side of the bed, or someone looks at them, and this mood just lingers and they can't get rid of it. They become the mood. It's an absolute state of identification. Unnecessary haste. When we do things with, we're not really paying attention and we cut corners. Nervousness, worry. Just that feeling that people can have of nervousness, worry within themselves, irritability. When we get irritated at the weather, at someone's frowning at us, at the things not working right at our computer. Imagination. And be aware that there's a right use of imagination, which is called active being, mentation, and a wrong use. A wrong use of imagination, underneath it lies the ego. And it's like we imagine in this situation, in that situation, and it's really also partly the wrong work of centers, because the imagination steals part of the feeling center, and there's a feeling that goes along with it, but at the basis is the ego. And then there's the wrong work of center. So there's stuff that the intellectual center does better than the emotional center. And there are things the emotional center does better than the intellectual center. The intellectual center's hydrogen-48 is actually very slow. If you have to learn to drive a car, you start with the intellectual center. But when you drive it, ultimately you've learned it, it moves over to the moving center, and your reactions and everything are much faster. You know, try to look for examples of that in your life. How when you learn something with your head brain, it's slower, and knowing how to do something with your body brain is faster. So the finger exercises, particularly when you first start, you start with your head brain, and they're very slow. But you want to get to the point where your head brain is no longer involved in the feel and the finger exercises. And then you add the counting, which is actually an authentic head brain exercise. You bring both of those into it so that you begin to notice that your head brain operates with a different energy at a different speed than your body brain. Unnecessary tension of muscles. The number of times I've caught myself washing dishes with my jaw. My jaw has nothing to do with washing dishes, but clenching my teeth, bringing my whole body into it. And we waste a lot of energy that way. Perpetual chatter. This is where mala beads and rosaries or anything like that are useful, because they keep the formatory apparatus in line, so to speak, focusing on those words that we are thinking in the mind. I am. Breathing in I and breathing out am is another way of using that perpetual chatter of the formatory apparatus in the head brain to focus it on something useful, to keep it occupied, doing something useful. 12, interest continually taken in things happening around us or to other people, and having, in fact, no interest whatever. This is most of humanity. We pay attention to things that are absolutely irrelevant and meaningless. It's a waste of our attention. Mr. Gurdjieff said the most powerful quality we have is the power of attention. And the attention comes from the prefrontal cortex of our head brain. I can bring my attention to my right shoulder. A chimpanzee cannot bring their attention consciously to their right shoulder because they don't have the prefrontal cortex in their brain. They have the mammalian brain, but not the human brain. So it's a very advanced power of our prefrontal cortex. But Mr. Gurdjieff said a moment of inattention is lost forever. You will never have a second chance, or you will never be able to regain that moment of inattention. And that inattention is a property of our head brain. And to focus on things that are useless, meaningless, that, other people talking, or just, you just become aware of this in people, how much of their energy is really pouring from the empty to the void, using that wonderful expression of Mr. Gurdjieff's. It has no purpose, no value whatsoever. And the constant waste of the force of attention. The expression of unpleasant sensations. Oh, my back. Oh, that hurts. That's actually mechanical suffering. If, let's say, your knee hurts and it's like, oh, my knee hurts. And every time you walk, you groan and whatever. You are summoning up a negative emotion and experiencing that pain mechanically. Whereas if you consciously experience that pain, you allowed yourself to become aware of that pain consciously through the power of intent. That conscious, intentional, volitional suffering elevates the process of that pain in the body. So not just the non-expression of negative emotions, but the non-expression of unpleasant sensations. To sit in the pain, to become aware of it consciously without giving a negative expression to it. So the expression is really an unpleasant emotion. Restlessness. We all know people who have legs and they just, when they're talking to you, they're shaking their legs. They're wasting a tremendous amount of energy. Mr. Gurdjieff said that we should consciously relax the large, medium, and small muscles at least 3 times a day to just get into a deeper, calmer state so that we are not using that energy, wasting that energy through restlessness, through the constant moving of our body. And then the constantly moving flow of thoughts in our mind. This is related to 11, the perpetual chatter, boom, boom, boom. And the associative mind associates. Mr. Gurdjieff said you can't stop that, but we can stop having that the center of gravity of ourselves and be in that. And perhaps, work with an affirmation or work with the words I am, or, work with beads or whatever to harness that chatter in our mind. And then the continual change of mood, feelings, and emotions. And this is part of the multiplicity of eyes, how we shift through all of these emotions on a regular basis, just always changing. So these are things to begin observing within ourselves. These are where the machine is dirty. Perhaps we haven't cleaned the spark plugs. Perhaps the fuel line is dirty. Perhaps our oil is dirty. And in order to get the machine running optimally, we've got to first clean the machine. So we can self-remember, we can bring ourselves back to this self-remembering state, but we can only do it for a very short period of time. If we begin to clean the machine, we will release enough energy to allow us to do it even more. And this cleansing of our machine is required. It's important to help us self-remember. It's important to free up that energy. And Mr. Gurdjieff said we have to remember many times, probably tens of thousands of times, before we grow something within us. And self-remembering is the center of gravity for the first step in the work, the step up to personal consciousness. The second center of gravity, once we are able to do that, is remorse of conscience or conscience. Remorse of conscience is cleaning away the ash that has grown up around the ember of consciousness within us, so that we can begin to experience consciousness, which will then help us tune into the higher emotional center, which will then have the sufficient energy to give me 12 the shock it needs to begin developing in the octave of impressions, which will then give the energy necessary for C12 to begin again developing upwards. So this is, sort of a quick rendition of some of the things that I went through last week. So try to become aware of where you leak energy. For myself, I was very much living in my mind. When I was a 23-year-old student and came across these teachings, the two things that I thought, I can't, I am my mind. I don't want to lose these thoughts. And now I realize it thinks. I don't think. I'm something else. And that I didn't lose these thoughts. I just lost my egocentric identification with those thoughts. The other thing that I really feared giving up was my imagination. I loved daydreaming. It was the way I dealt with a lot of unpleasant moods and whatever, particularly as a teenager. I would shut my eyes and almost like Walter Mitty, imagining himself as a fighter pilot and doing all of these things. It was a way that I had learned to cope, and it was such a fun thing for me to do. So it was like, I have to give this up, and no, I don't have to give my thoughts up. I have to become aware of it thinking. I have to give up my daydreams and imagination. Yes, I had to give them up. Active being mentation is using the same power, but using it for work-related things. So to imagine, for instance, myself walking down the street and imagine myself, being aware of how I land with my heel and push off with my ball and toes, and to imagine the sensation of my toe joints, my ankle joints, my knee joints. That's the right use of imagination, and there are other forms of right use of imagination. So, and then moods also. I used to get stuck in moods, not for too long. That was not quite my weakness, but they would come and take over me for a while, and then they would dissipate. But, you know, negative emotions and snapping in my mind at people, and you've got to begin looking through that list and figuring out which ones are dominant for you, which ones are your key ways of leaking energy, and slowly, you know, clean the spark plugs, change the oil, clean the gas tank, make sure that your carburetor is clean, do all of these things to get your machine in proper working order, to release that energy necessary for self-remembering. And then we have to clean our past, and the repairing of the past is remorse of conscience. That's a higher step than just cleaning the machine. So first we work on the first step, and then we work on the second step through repairing the past through remorse of conscience. At any rate, it's noon. We're out of time. I'd like to thank you all for being here today. Those of you who are watching on Facebook, those of you who have, in the group, and those of you who are watching on YouTube. Try and think of yourself as a machine. Try to figure out those places where you're dirty. Maybe this is where I'll begin next meeting, asking all of you, try to observe within yourself, where do you leak this energy? Where are you unclean? Where is your machine not working properly? At any rate, have a good day, and we'll meet again next week.
Thanks,
Bye.
Allan.
Bye.
Bye.